Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our virtual meeting on the proposed Magurio annexation. My name is Jennifer Tomlinson. I'm the Superintendent of Parks for Boise Parks and Recreation, and I'll be doing a presentation tonight on the proposal that we have before us that we will be submitting to Planning and Zoning, and then some additional details kind of as we move through the process. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. There is a large number of people participating on this call. We've had over 400 people register. So we have muted folks, but the question function is active. So if you do have questions, we'll be looking at answering those at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen with you and go over some of the aspects of this project. So really quick, I'd just like to go over the purpose of this meeting. The city will be submitting an annexation and land use map amendment proposal. This is necessary because these properties are not located within the city limits. In order to consider doing anything with the properties, they first have to be in the city limits. So this is a neighborhood meeting. It is a pre-application requirement for submitting any applications to Planning and Zoning Commission. Generally, you'll see this come from developers when they're proposing any kind of development. So it's a similar process. It's just a little bit different because in this case, the city is actually going to be the applicant through the process. So I'll go over some of the information about the properties included in the request, a little bit of background and history on the Magurio Park property, park development in general, and some of our impact fees as we've collected them out in this area, the proposed process that we're looking at for the land swap, next steps, and then if we have time at the end, we'll get to questions. So the parcels that we have proposed for annexation, they're under 3 different ownerships. We have the Boise Air Terminal that's up off of Victory Road. We have the Boise Independent School District parcels, and those also front on Victory Road. And then we have the city parks parcel known as the Magurio property. The reason why we're doing this is because, as you can see, the city limits are currently at Victory Road, and in order to be eligible for annexation, we have to have a path. The school district properties are providing that path for us. As part of the application process, we will be submitting a proposal to change the land use map designation. These are the land uses as they're outlined in Blueprint Boise. And there are 2 different map amendments that we're looking at. The first one is for the school district property. They're currently in the process of surplusing their 15 acres that fronts on Victory Road. So that property is proposed for a mixed use land use designation. Now they're currently going through that surplus property and they have a call out for proposals. Their call does not close until July. So they really aren't exactly sure what the use is going to be on that property. But they do know that mixed use should accommodate everything that they've heard from folks as potential options for what they're looking at, what potential uses might be on the site. And then for the Magurio property, we're looking at changing the land use from parks and open space and bringing it in with a proposed compact land use designation. This would allow somebody to change the, have the most flexibility in design and a range of densities if they're looking at doing some development on the site. So those are the 2 main applications that are going to be going and being submitted through the Planning and Zoning Commission and then ultimately for City Council approval. So just some background on the Magurio property itself. The airport did purchase this property from the Magurio family in 1992. There were no restrictions placed on the property in the purchase and sale agreement. There seems to be a little bit of misinformation out there that either the property was donated or that it was somehow restricted by the family, and that's not the case. It was an outright purchase for fair market value between the airport and the family. So in 1993, our city council at the time did pass a resolution expressing an intent of the city council to reserve it for parks and recreation purposes. In 1997, the airport did record a declaration of restricted covenants. And what that does is it limits the use of the property. So the property was transferred between the airport and the Parks and Recreation Department in 1998. And a portion of that did have the restrictive, a component of that transfer was related to the covenant that was put on the property. And I just wanted to make sure everybody had the definition of a covenant. And it really is any term that will restrict a buyer from taking an action or requiring that they abstain from a specific action in a real estate transaction. So covenants are something that our council can place. It's kind of like in a neighborhood where you'll have covenants, codes, and restrictions that govern the use of like a neighborhood or a subdivision. So the covenants that were placed on the property, there were actually quite a few. So I highlighted the ones that I believe are probably the most relevant to this discussion and this proposal. And they are for no residential property, no commercial, and that basically the parcel be used in perpetuity as open space. The result of not following those covenants in the resolution that was adopted by council is that the parcel could revert to the airport for their own operation and interest. So these covenants are something that can be removed. Sorry, one second. I just got a little note to do a different. Okay. So the covenants on the property, they are something that can be removed by city council if they so choose to. And it did actually already happen once in 2009 to accommodate the fire station that was placed on the site. If any of these actions do move forward, the airport would be reimbursed the original purchase price from 1998 that was $620,000 in cash. Oops. Sorry, one second, folks. I'm just getting a note that I don't exactly have the correct format up. Oh, sounds like it's working now. Okay. So as I was saying, covenants can be removed by a resolution of city council, and then the airport would be reimbursed the original purchase price from 1998. So as far as park development goes, our current cost estimate for greening up this site, which is usually our first phase of development with parks, and that's turf, irrigation, trees, parking, and pathways, is currently approaching $30 to $35 million. And as part of the city's program of how we develop and operate our park system, we do not green up parks that are not located within the city limits. We rely on the tax base of residents in the city limits to support the maintenance and the operations of the parks and to keep them in good condition moving forward. So that's really the reason why this has come to be such an issue, is because this property is not located in the city limits and it has never been in any of our capital plans for development. We've gotten a lot of questions about impact fees. So I just wanted to touch on those a little bit. In general, they're charged to builders. We do base them on the park type. And our comprehensive plan outlines that residents within the city limits are served by a hierarchy of parks. So we have two different kinds of park impact fees that we charge to builders, for the neighborhood and community parks, and then for regional parks. So neighborhood and community parks, in this area, we have Molinar Park, which is 20 acres on Maple Grove. And then we also have Peppermint Park, located a little bit further to the west. And then this site is classified in our comprehensive plan as a regional park. And then just as far as our adopted service level goes, we do not have one adopted for residents outside of the city limits. Since 1997, the city has collected approximately $10 million in park impact fees. That is split between the two different kinds of parks that we have between the local and between the regional. So the 4.3 million has gone to Molinar and Peppermint, and Molinar actually is about to get a playground and splash pad. The contracts for that project were just signed last week. So those improvements are moving forward. And then Peppermint Park has been built out for a good bit at a time. And then the $6.2 million is for our regional parks. So when we talk about regional parks, we're looking usually at Ann Morrison, Esterson Plot, things of those size that we anticipate not only serve the entire city limits, but they also generally serve the Treasure Valley. Okay, thank you. So just a little bit of information about the proposed land swap process. A developer did approach the city about the potential land swap. And the city is looking at all options on the table as far as trying to address our kind of critical housing shortage that we're looking at. So really, when we were approached about the opportunity, there are some real benefits to it, such as getting canal connectivity. It's a great path forward in our pathways plan, and looking at really starting to provide regional connections along our canals, pathways through the property, and then getting some open space. We did talk about 7 acres in this site that would be built as a public park. So that would be large enough to include like soccer fields and some different kinds of amenities. None of that information has been figured out yet. It was basically just a kind of a placeholder. And then really the land exchange process is a really good path for the city to get that housing stock below the area median price. And that was kind of part of the proposal, is that any new units that come in do come in below the area median price. So if the city moves forward with the proposal, there are 2 specific steps that are going to happen. One will be a resolution authorizing the surplus of the property. And in that resolution, there will be a request for a public hearing date for that surplus process. And the second is a resolution to authorize the removal of the covenant that outlines the restrictions on the use. So the resolutions, as far as our council is concerned, those are items that once we get kind of more details figured out, that we will be back to you with information on when those items will be scheduled. So as you can see, we have 2 kind of separate and distinct processes that we're trying to go through within the city. So the planning and zoning entitlement process, which is the annexation and the land use map amendment, and then the surplus, and then the potential or proposed land swap process. So it's kind of like bringing 2 planes into land at the same time. So I've been working to separate out all of the comments that everybody has been making for the ones who are making comments about the land swap, and for the ones who are making comments about the map amendment and the proposed annexation. So on the land swap, if you do have comments about that particular thing, then we're just asking that you email our BPR address with the title of land swap in the process, so that we can track all of those comments and make sure we have a complete record. And I will post all of this information on our website so that folks can have access to it after the end of the meeting. So the next steps for the annexation and the map amendment, as I mentioned, this is kind of our first step in going through that process. So applications for those 2 items will be submitted at the end of June. And then Planning and Development Services will schedule for the Planning and Zoning Commission probably in August. That's usually the time frame that they're on. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission will make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will ultimately decide the matter of the annexation and the map amendment. So if you do have comments that are specific to the map amendment and the annexation application, those can go to a different email address, which is the zoninginfo@cityofboise.org. So that way we can track that record separately for all of the comments that are specific to the map amendment and the annexation. So I know I ran through that pretty fast. So it looks like it leaves us a good bit of time for questions. So I think what I'll do is I will go into the question bar and I will see if I can start answering them. Let's see. So the first question is, has the city previously attempted to annex land in this area? This area is the impact area, which is defined by state code as an area that is likely to be annexed into the future and is an urban growth area. From what I understand, historically, the council has looked at annexation in this area and it didn't go very well. So there was not a lot of support for annexation. And since that time, that's been probably in the last 20 years that the council's looked at annexation. And it hasn't happened. So I'm not sure. I can't really speak to why it hasn't happened. I just know that it hasn't happened. So then there's a question. Previously, they did not want houses here because in the flight line from the airport. Why the change? So this property is actually located in Airport Influence Area A. And if you look at our airport land use regulations, those areas are not prohibited from allowing residential development. The airport generally prohibits residential development in like B1 and C because those are directly within the flight path line. But in Airport Influence Area A, we have that actually all over a lot of the Southwest. And sound attenuation is generally required in a lot of those units, but it is not prohibited from happening. Is the land they want to swap for geologically unsound for the developer to build? I cannot answer that question. I do not know the answer to it. So if the city has nothing to do with this, then why are they involved? The city is the landholder. We own the property. So as the property owner, that is our responsibility to take forward the applications. Is the mayor and council aware of testimony given approximately 35 years ago regarding to trade land with BLM for Foothills property in the north in return for the city giving land to the Birds of Prey project? I can't speak to that. I do not know the answer to that one, but we can follow up and maybe do a frequently asked questions or any of the questions that we can't answer throughout this process. We can take those and then we can kind of post those on our website. So you mean more homes? Okay, let's see. I am on Kim. So you mean more homes. So the developer has proposed locating homes on the McGurdia Park site. Why has Park and Recreation decided to present this proposal? This, like I said, this is the first step in any kind of annexation discussion. And as we move throughout the process, there will be different opportunities for public comment and public involvement. Would the land swap protect land in the foothills if the trade takes place? Yes. Your director publicly and specifically addressed residential in the area and removing the park. Sorry, that keeps moving. All right. Your director specifically asked residential development in the area and removing the park. We're not ignoring the land swap and development of the land. We just don't have enough details because we're so early on in the process that you know, I could accurately describe things that are going to happen. How do we protest this decision? We do not want the swap and do want the park that was planned. So this is where it would be really good to have folks email. If you are opposed to the land swap, then that's where you're going to email bpr@cityofboise.org. And again, we'll lay all this out for you on our website so that you have some pretty clear direction on where is the best place to put your comments. Is the council planning to remove the covenants? A date has not been set for that. I feel like I lost my place. Why not reimbursement of market value for the airport? So the way that the agreement reads is that the airport has to be reimbursed the amount of the swap as it was at the time when it was swapped. So if Boise breaks the covenants, it reverts to the Boise Municipal Airport owned by the city of Boise. What is the point of the covenants? I do not know. I can't answer that question. We have not identified where reimbursement funds will come from. Like I said, we're super early in this process. So a lot of these details we just don't know yet. Should real estate professionals be aware this park could be removed? All of this information is public, so I'm sure. Does this park have to have green up? Generally, we green up parks as they're in the city limits. Could it be kept as open space with pathways or have a new vision for the park applied? That's certainly a possibility, but that is not part of the proposal that we have right now. Why did you purchase it and agree to the covenants if you're never going to green it up? I cannot speak to that. Again, I really can't speak to the history of what happened in the 90s. I wasn't part of that discussion, so I'm not exactly sure. I can tell you, like I said, it has never been in a capital plan of ours. The area was intended, from what I can tell, to be annexed, and that it never got annexed. And without annexation, it was never slated to be developed. The city owns the property, they have jurisdiction, no different than the county building being built city property. So it's a policy of the city not to green up properties that are located outside of the city limits. And that's kind of how we've operated for the last 30 years, at least, I think. We've just never been in the business of providing these kinds of facilities in areas where we don't have residents who are in the city limits. If you have to annex it to trade it away to develop it, why not annex it to build the park committed to long ago? Again, kind of a similar vein. The rest of the area around it is not annexed into the city limits. So without having folks around it who are paying taxes into the system, the city has made the policy decision not to develop parks that are located outside the city limits. The area is not prepared to support high density housing. Cost is an issue. Why not propose a tax bill to actually inquire if the residents would financially support this? Molinar Park does not have the field or park play areas originally proposed for this area. Please listen to the residents. We will have a copy of all of these comments and we will submit them with our applications. I cannot speak to the motivation of the developer. No, this improvements for Molinar were not suddenly approved knowing that the city was going to do a land swap. Those have been in the works for 1.5 years. As a result of COVID, we did run into supply chain issues, so we weren't able to actually complete our orders or get a contractor under contract to put those improvements in. So what type of housing would be built? Low cost, high density. I can't speak to those details yet. So I think probably some of the details are being worked through. I don't think we just want to trade it off. Why have the neighbor, let's see, what about the wildlife that is already there? So the area is farmed, so I can't really speak to wildlife that may be on the property. Why have the neighborhoods above the canal never been included in annexing plans when that helps support the original plans for the park? From what I understand, the history is that the Southwest has been very opposed to annexation into the city limits. And that's been at least for the last 15 years or so that I'm aware of. Why can't the desert be developed? That is a good question. And I also don't have the answer to that. What about fencing around Molinar Park? Will impact fees cover complete fencing around the park? Or are you providing? We don't generally fence our parks off from neighbors. We do A lot of neighbors do have fences on our park sites, but that's not something that we generally put in. Isn't a substitute park proposed for another area? No, the kind of part of the proposed land swap was that a 7-acre parcel would be located on the Mergerdio site as part of any development that goes in there. How will the city widen the roads and sidewalks to ensure safe commuter paths? That's a great question. So ACHD, as I'm sure you're all very aware, is in charge of our roadways, but there are things the city can do to, add sidewalk connections, add pathway connectivity, and really ensure at least the beginnings of an off-street network in the area. Boise City Parks and Rec stated in Channel News that there are now sufficient sports fields in the city. It was just a few years ago, lacrosse folks were petitioning for more fields. It's noted there were no lacrosse fields built on Chuck McDevitt Park as planned. From what I understand, lacrosse fields needs are being met generally in Morrison Park. Also, the agreement with the Lacrosse Association for McDevitt Park didn't, from what I understand, it didn't actually, the funding wasn't able to be secured for that. Was the original price low because the land was recommended to be in the flight path? So the airport bought the land to avoid development. So the airport purchased the property at fair market value of almost $1.3 million in 1992. And I am not exactly sure why they bought the land, but I would imagine it had something to do with kind of noise associated with the flight path. I cannot speak to how long the developer owned the Foothills property. I also cannot speak to why he doesn't build on the Foothills property. Is the land swap pertaining to the Quail Ridge area? Not sure I understand the question. How can new housing be guaranteed at a lower than median price? Wouldn't it be sold for market value and the highest bidder? Is the builder proposing actual affordable housing? So there's a voluntary commitment to get a market rate or just under market rate housing out there. I cannot speak to the details of how we guarantee a lower than median price. But from what I understand, land is a fairly significant cost in the development of residential units. So by removing or by swapping that out with other land, it does bring down the price of the property. We want the regional park here. It will help balance out a very lopsided scenario where everyone pays and the north end gets the lion's share of the benefits. A regional investment here would be a great move to help balance the equation. Before you consider adding more dwellings, the infrastructure needs to right size to accommodate all the associated cars. It's sad to hear that the only way the canal can be connected is with the land swap. We've been working on a pathway plan in the city to look at how we can actually get pathway and canal pathways to create a viable off-street network, especially east-west and north-south. I don't know that the canal can only be connected with the land swap, but I know that it is an important and critical piece of looking at anything that's going to happen in this area. So city council decides yes. So there will not be a ballot amendment. No. Will the public be able to give testimony when this comes before P&Z or city council? Yes, both of those items will be public hearings. Why aren't you treating this as one project since you wouldn't be doing one without the other? Not sure I understand the question. They have to go through two separate processes as outlined in state code. So that's why we're trying to get them both lined up so that they can go through their respective processes. I cannot answer the question of who is the developer. So you use taxpayer funds to buy the land, but you cannot use taxpayer money to develop it for a park. The city does not have and has not been able to collect enough impact fees to cover the cost of developing it as a park. So Marissa, to answer your question about the comments received so far, I will submit all of those comments with the annexation and land use map amendment. And then if I do get, and then I'll try to pull out all the comments that are just on the land swap so that the city council can have all of the comments specific to the land swap, independent from any comments that are on the annexation and land use map amendment. But all of the comments so far will be submitted. I cannot answer the question of where the land is located. So at this time, only the Boise School District and the Mogurdio properties are slated for annexation. Again, there are the 2 small airport parcels that are up off of Victory Road. That's more a matter of business for the airport. Based on the tone of the slides, is this meeting just a formality? This meeting is a requirement of our application processes through our Planning and Zoning Commission. Is not a done deal. It does have an option for protest, and that would be if you are opposed to the land swap, then your avenue for voicing your opinion on that is really going to be through the city council and the surplus hearing process. What is the plan for the swapped area? I guess I don't know which geography you're referring to. The promise to provide needed parks and recreational facilities for citizens in the growing areas of Southwest Boise. Again, absent annexation, the city has a policy of not greening up land that is outside of the city limits. We do not have proposed traffic counts yet, again, because it's so early in the process. Let's see. Comparison of parks between North End and East End compared to Southwest area. Those are 2 entirely different geographies, and not to keep harping on this issue, but the Southwest is outside of the city limits. Shouldn't this activity be put on hold until we have a new slate of council persons rather than at large, whereby the Southwest is guaranteed to have representation? I can't really speak to that one either. I was given some directions and I'm following through with those. So are there any plans to mitigate the loss of this park space for additional park space in Southwest Boise? So as part of this process, we have begun to look at property that is in the area that is potentially available for green up. And we have been working in partnership with the school district. They do have they have a parcel that's on 5 Mile Creek that we're looking at developing in a manner that's similar to Hyatt Hidden Lakes Reserve in West Boise. And then they also have some vacant land on the south of their property that is on the north side of the Mogurdio property. So we've been in discussions with them about what it would like, looking at a potential option there to see if we can get some open space and natural areas and some pathways through their property. What does the city propose to do about water issues? Again, super early in the process, I can't really speak to them. There was a plan to develop the space in the park. Why did that never happen? It never happened because the land was never annexed into the city limits. There's no open space in this neighborhood, so why not use this site? Again, part of the proposal is to develop a neighborhood serving park on the site. How do you justify more development here? I guess I don't understand the question about school and admin buildings. Those facilities will remain on site. And then, as I mentioned, we will be looking at doing some open space and some other park type development on the school district properties in the areas where it's vacant. Where would future parks go in the Southwest area if and when it is annexed into the city? So the city does have a few land holdings out in the Southwest. We have the Pearl Jensen site on Lake Hazel. As part of the Syringa Valley development, we have the Coughlin Park site, which is 10 acres. So that'll be built probably in the next 10 years or so. And then we have a couple of other parcels out in the Southwest. So we would look at developing those if the city limits were extended to the area of impact boundary. ahead of the stepchildren. Oh, what is in it for the city and its residents? It is an opportunity for the city to begin to address the affordable housing shortage that we have and the real situation that we have around providing housing for folks. I cannot speak to any other means of funding the park. Would developers consider a park that is greater than 7 acres and is the best place to submit comments to the email under the land swap slide regarding ideas for what the community would like to have the park to have? It's possible. I mean, we could look at like a 10-acre park. We need to look at the service level needs in the area, but I would say those probably should go under the land swap slides. If this proposal does move forward, there will be an engagement process with the community out there as far as what folks would like to see. And that would be something that would be moved forward kind of in partnership with the developer. How is the land not protected in the north end? Jennifer, do you personally support this proposal? My job is to provide you guys as much information as I can so that you know all of your different avenues for how to participate in this process. What is being done to support the south end of the valley? So again, as part of the Syringa Valley development, there is a park, a neighborhood park going in as part of that. I don't think we have it scheduled yet because that one's a little bit, the development on that one has been a little bit behind schedule. Is there anything we can do to make the original park happen? It's definitely a funding issue at this point. So the city is not going to have, you know, $35 million that is available to develop this park. Will individuals have an opportunity to oppose breaking the covenants? So that's a resolution that is passed by city council. It's generally handled on the consent agenda and there's no public hearing associated with that. How do you plan to ensure access and suitable land for parks southwest and Widen not yet impact? Oh my gosh, we're up to 154 questions. I don't know that I'm going to actually be able to answer all of these. Traffic. Road. As far as the traffic is concerned, any kind of implications will be assessed through the permitting and the development process, and it will. We will obviously ask ACHD for their comments, and they will provide mitigation measures. If it wasn't never slated to be developed, then again, I cannot speak to the decisions that were made in the 90s. When my family sold this land, they were told it was due to noise complaints from airplanes. Are those complaints still a concern? I imagine that the noise is fairly similar for the rest of you folks who live around there, so it would be a similar kind of thing. It's not a question of whether or not we want to annex the rest of the Southwest. It's been a topic of discussion in the city for a number of years. As I mentioned earlier, I think that there was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was an effort to look at annexing the area that was not successful. There's no access. Housing shortage. ACG was not aware of this when Cole Road was updated. I do not know if the city is willing to attempt annexing the southwest area again. I do know that with the recent changes in our legislation that have changed our property tax calculation, it has reduced the amount of funding that the city can take from an annexation. So that will probably fairly negatively impact any kind of modeling that we do, because when we do look at annexing an area, we look at all of the impacts that we're going to have on police, parks, fire, library, and then city services in general, like planning and development services and all of the different areas that the city provides services to residents. So it's a pretty intense process, and it's something that the city does, on every few years. We take a look at annexation of the Southwest, but the latest legislation that was just approved by the legislature has changed our ability to kind of recoup the expenses that would have to be put out to bring the area in. So I believe at some point the city planned to annex the area, otherwise it wouldn't have put it in the impact area. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Shouldn't the business of Parks and Recreation be developing and expanding the park system, not giving potential park sites away? What criteria was used to determine if a few significantly smaller parts are a better choice in the open space concept intended in 1997? Not sure I totally understand the question. I don't think it's an either or comparison. It's just really about our regional serving facilities. Why does this property have to be developed? Is this going to be another grouping of high density housing and no improvements on infrastructure? Infrastructure improvements will come with any kind of increase in density or any kind of increase in use in the area. If we auctioned off the property, we don't even know what would happen. And this is really a good option and like a best case as far as getting some of the things that are a priority for the city through this kind of deal. Why is the size more in the local park size? Is there an option for a larger park area? That's something that we could probably take a look at. Again, as part of this proposal, we are looking at the school district property, and I want to say it's around 43 acres up there that we are looking at. This deal is not already done. And I can't speak to where the land swap property is. Let's see. I can't speak to where all of our council members live. It was never in a capital plan, yet the proposed park plans were on the website until recently. That is correct. Does city planning have a ratio of park acres to population relative to the area of the park placement in the city? We do. We have an adopted service level in our comprehensive plan. Traffic if you do the land swap. Again, we would be working in partnership with ACHD to remedy or at least address and mediate some of the transportation issues. I'm sure a traffic impact statement or analysis would have to be done as part of any project moving forward. To remove original information for this future park from the city website. We had the kind of the background and the history on there. I can't speak to why it was removed. And then Marissa, I am not exactly sure when this idea first came about, and I also don't know when the developer approached the city. So the city builds fire stations in partnership with Whitney Fire Protection District, and they have a different level of service. So they serve those areas that are outside of the city limits. Sewer was originally extended to the southwest in the 80s to address a lot of septic failure that happened in the southwest on lots that were permitted that were half an acre or smaller. So the city extended sewer in an effort to avoid some of those groundwater contamination issues. I can't speak to who the developer is. I've had a plan to develop the park, so now you say they didn't plan it for a park. What I said, we do have yes, we have a master plan for the process. However, it has never been in any capital plan. So it was never, the cost of the park was never included in our calculation of impact fees. So our impact fees, and especially in the county outside of the city limits, are limited. And they are right now at a proportion of what they are for residents or for builders within the city limits. So it's a pretty significant difference between the two, but that cost of the park was not included in a capital plan to get that cost recovered through impact fees. Is this the way Boise wants to annex the area? I'm not sure how to answer that. There will be public hearings, both through the planning and zoning and through the city council. What is actually the land swap if the city doesn't get other property located somewhere else? I'm not sure I understand that question. This is not an item generally that would be out for a public vote. How large is a region that would be taxed for regional parks citywide? What percentage portion of the taxable region is within city limits for the McGurdio taxable region? So the only portion of the southwest that is in the city limits is the area from, at least from an impact fee collection practice. There is a geography. We have different geographies in the city, and we break the city up into planning areas. And so the southwest planning area, I believe, is south of the freeway. So only the area between the freeway and Victory Road is within the city limits. How can we get a conversation started about Southwest Boise joining city limits? That is a really good question. I will have to think on that one. And then hopefully I'll be able to post on that, like on our city website. Why is there no plan to include future sports park needs when the discussion centers around increasing density? So like I mentioned, any proposed neighborhood park that goes in there would be able to accommodate at least some soccer fields and then some other amenities as kind of decided amongst the community. Will the below market value hurt the value of our current properties? The reason why the property is valued so low is because of the residential and the covenants on the property. So without the covenants, it's worth a good bit more than it is with the covenants. City council is charged to meet the needs of all residents, not just North Enders. Can't really speak to that. They are responsible to all of the residents in Boise who are located within the city limits. And we do provide park service to residents in the Southwest who are within the city limits. No school capacity or proposed future. So the school districts review development applications when they're submitted to planning and zoning. And they would be able to speak to the need for more or existing schools and the capacities that they have. It's the Foothills property. That I cannot speak to. I do not know the answer of the Foothills property. Why are there more parks on the north side? A decided inequality exists. There are more public parks in the north side of the city, probably because that area was platted in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they're on a very connected street grid. And so there were more opportunities to get more park sites. And it was really important part of developing urban areas at the time. Kind of as planning has progressed throughout the city, a lot of our areas have developed with private neighborhood parks and neighborhood association parks to support residents. So that's something that you see that's pretty common. If you look at the city, you know, if you look at the north end of the city, north and east ends, those are kind of our original town site areas. And those do have parks on a pretty geographically dispersed area because of the street grid in the kind of how they were platted. But as you move out to the west and the southeast and kind of those areas, the street grid really does change out there. And so a lot of those really did look at open space more on a subdivision by subdivision kind of, I guess, lens. I cannot speak to why this is happening before the council gets elected by districts. What is Boise future plans of annexation? Also, I do not know what our future plans are for annexation. You do know there's already a pathway. I do know there's a canal along the pathway, but also the Project Board of Controls isn't super excited about the fact that the public uses it. So I think that where we were looking at was as adjacent to it and out of their easement as possible. With the previously approved 2,000 homes approved on Cole as a pathway to annex Southwest Boise stronger? It is coming in, you know, from kind of a different direction. So generally we look at it going south, but now, you know, we're kind of coming at it from a different area. So, I mean, you could argue that there is, you know, more of a kind of an east-west effort, I guess, than north to south. What are the canal pathways actually, and who does it benefit? So the city's been working on a pathways plan for about the last year where we're inventorying all of the different off-street pathways that we have and what those different areas connect up to. So really the intent is to provide off-street connectivity that's not vehicular so people can walk and bike along those pathways. Are there studies on how it will impact existing property values? No, there are no studies on that. I am not disclosing the developer because they have asked to remain private. Why can't we look at annexation again now? As I mentioned, at the city, every couple of years, we do look at annexing the Southwest. We model it pretty intensely. And I don't know that we have had the opportunity to model it considering the new impacts of the legislature out of this last session. How much money has been collected from leasing it for a farm for the last 25 years? I will have to follow up with that on that one, and I can get you that information because we are in an annual lease. Seems like the only person to benefit is a developer. Is built within a subdivision. It could be restricted to other areas. Why can't we reach a compromise? Again, this is the first meeting. This is our first opportunity to reach out to folks and let us know what's happening and let you guys know kind of what is going on. So I don't know that there isn't an opportunity to compromise. Estimated impact fees from Locale and Muriel Farms. I do not have the estimated impact fees from Muriel Farms yet, but I do have them from Locale. That's information that I would have to put up on the website as a follow-up. Does canal connectivity give the city a path to be able to annex or other property with canal frontage? It does not. State code regarding annexation specifically prohibits cities from using canals as adjacency to get a path to annexation. Targeted donations to make it a park like you've done with other parks. You know, we have not explored fundraising options for this site, but we still have the issue of the fact that it will be the only thing developed with the whole area around it being in the area of impact. So the legislature stoppage of the impact fees we've always requested as part of the reason we can't afford to keep this as a park. The legislature didn't stop impact fees. What they did was they reduced our ability to collect revenue on annexed property and then on new construction. So the city has impact fees. We're actually going through an update to our impact fees right now. And the last time we did it was in like 2016, but the last time we did it before that was in 2008. So we are fairly behind in our impact fee collection practices, especially in this area, because as I mentioned earlier, we collect a lower fee in the area of impact. Why not annex this area defined and develop the park? It is a funding issue. Would the city be considered annexation if they do not have an offer from the developer? I cannot speak to that one. Roadways, no one knows that here. No south on Maple Grove, cannot reasonably handle our sidewalks. These vehicles are too growth. Transportation infrastructure is definitely something we would work with ACHD on. There are not enough impact fees to develop the current park property. Would the swap property be developed? I believe it's intended for preservation. I do understand there's a huge difference between 160 and 7. You're going to sell it off, but you say you don't control it. It sounds pretty shady. Not sure I actually understand the question. Why can't the land be left ungreened up? Again, we had a proposal come in from a developer, and we are exploring all possible avenues of ways to address our housing shortage. Compact housing. So that's the land use designation. So that would allow a few different zones as far as implementation is concerned. So that's houses on smaller lots, and it's increased density. We watched on the website the end of auction, showed the winner. Why can we not know who the winner? I don't exactly know what you're referring to there. I cannot speak to the reason why we have not tried to annex in recent years. Huge. So Ada County does have their own parks department. They have a few facilities out there. But I don't know that they have the capacity to handle bringing on such a large facility. Yeah, so I'm specifically referring to the people who are south of Victory Road. I do realize that there are quite a few people who live north of Victory Road. Given city will annex south of Victory in time, so I keep using it. It's not an excuse. There's no plan for annexation right now. I do not have an answer to water table issues. Also, I can't speak to why we haven't tried to annex again. I put the estimate together for $33 million. We have recent cost estimates from 2 other parks this year, and our parks are coming in at least $200,000 an acre, and that's just for green up. Our construction environment right now is very difficult, and we have a really hard time finding people to build stuff for us. Will a person have to interfere with subdivisions to access the park proposed? I can't speak to that. I don't know that there's a final design yet for it. Also can't speak to the city's plans on moving the city limits. I don't know exactly where I'm at in the questions. It looks like we still have 180 to go, so maybe we'll give another 10 minutes and see how many more I can get through. So the district is only selling off one of their parcels, and it's 15 acres. Will those homes have access to canal water? I also can't speak to that. I'm not sure what the relationship is as far as folks being able to pull water off that canal. No, not all of the park parcels are 10 acres or less. Molinar Park is 20 acres. South Boise. It will be in the same annex and was in long-term plans until recently, so we're not green it up. We do not have the funding to green it up. What is to ensure future park sites aren't swapped at a later date like this land being considered? I don't know that there's anything that would prevent the city from looking at all of our properties unless we have actual deed restrictions on them for what we can do. The start time was at 6 p.m. and this will be available on our website. Utilities would be a requirement of the development. Our house valuation. I can't speak to house valuations. Let's see. You have funding for it. Keep saying about funding. Didn't the simplot Anderson. So the Simplots and the Albertsons foundations both have contributed to our parks in the system in our regional parks. So the Simplots towards Esther Simplot Park, and then the Albertsons Foundation towards Catherine Albertson Park, and then the Whitewater Park. The impact fees being generated from locale and the other proposed developments aren't enough to cover the cost of greening up the park. Same area instead of 10 miles across town. Yeah. Why not swap for something in the same area instead of 10 miles across town? Again, we were looking at doing something with the school district property to be able to provide some open space in the area. Sounds like the city should get new and more recent data on what people want to do in terms of bringing the city limits. Parcels want to sell this land, there will always be a buyer. Why can't we get new data, feedback, and talk to the community to see if people want to get annexed, and then make decisions on selling it to a developer? I think you're right. I think it has brought up a lot of opinion about annexation in the area. It's not just a question of whether people want it, it's also a question of the financial situation it will put the city into. So annexing the area immediately requires us to provide a number of different services. So like services that you get in the county will sunset, and then the city will have to step in and provide those services. And so it is definitely a costly thing that the city looks at doing. And it's not something that we're going to look at doing like quickly or lightly. I apologize if I'm mumbling the questions. I am trying to read them, but I will try to be more clear. And I am not attempting to be disrespectful to residents in Southwest Boise at all. The questions keep going up and down on the screen, and so I'm just trying to track where I left off. I can't speak to whether or not the city would consider other amenities at the site instead of housing. That isn't something that has been discussed. We do a lot of public-private partnerships in a lot of our park development. So it's a model that we're fairly familiar with. I'm not familiar with any kind of partner on this particular park project. There's plenty of land in Boise. We've actually found that there's a shortage of land in Boise. So that's why I believe we were proposed about this particular parcel. What parks do we have on the west side of town that are comparable to parks such as Marion, Williams, Esther Simplot? So parks on the west side of town include the Hyatt Hidden Lakes Wetlands and Reserve. There's Chuck McDevitt Sports Complex. And then we have a number of neighborhood parks that are also kind of scattered throughout West Boise. Most of us don't understand myself. Are there any other regional parks on the south side of I-84? There are not. I will have to double check on the capacity of City Council as far as having enough room at the hearings. I know that it's limited because of COVID. So we may have to look at some different options as far as accommodating folks. As I mentioned, we had over 400 people sign up for this. So we do realize there is a lot of interest. How about the city developing the park in a phased approach? So we generally develop in 2 phases. We develop in green up and then we go in with amenities. The first phase, turf irrigation, trees, pathways, and parking lots. And then the second phase is all the fun stuff like playgrounds and sports courts and those kinds of things. So that's where our initial cost estimate is around $33 million just for the green up phase. What kind of equity is there between parkland allotment and the other parts of the greater Boise area? Not exactly sure how to answer that one. So the compact land use designation that for the requested map amendment, it allows for up through, I believe, R2 zoning. So generally smaller lots. And a little bit denser development than a standard kind of suburban pattern. What are our options? Let's see, keep its virtual process of the park. So emailing your concerns in does actually do anything. It actually does quite a bit. So we do have a very large record so far. I have been kind of cataloging everybody's concerns and trying to keep a pretty clear record on where most folks stand on this one. I also did want to mention that I have been trying to answer everybody's email, especially if you have questions. If you did have a question that you emailed me and I didn't get back to you, I do apologize. I may have just missed it because I've had so many that I've been trying to respond to. So I'll go back through, see if there are any questions that I wasn't able to answer this evening, and post those on our website, or I'll just respond to you in the emails that you sent me. Why was this not communicated better? So we followed the communication or the notification outlined in Boise City Code for development applications. It does have a larger area that it affects, that's for sure. We don't have a state code is pretty, all they require for a city council to surplus a piece of property is to do notification in the newspaper of record. Obviously that has not gone out because we do not have a meeting date set. And we're still in the very early stages of that. So we notified the residents within 500 feet of the site of the annexation and the map amendment. How could you possibly revise the plans you will submit to council in 11 days? Don't you already know more than you are telling us? The plans that I will be submitting to the Planning and Zoning Commission are everything that you have seen. It is the maps showing the annexation outline of the proposed new city limits. And it includes the map amendment and then the justification for that. There are not right now any discussions around alternate proposals. I think I'll do one more question and then we will try to get to the rest of your questions and we will post the answers to those on the website. So the phased funding, the city of Boise is not required to provide affordable housing, but our mission and our goal is to create a city for everyone. And then finally, we'll go with William Kinnett. Why does Boise purchase properties outside of the city limits with expectations to develop them as parks similar to McGurdio, but then decide to use differently? And then like I said, I can't speak to the commitments that were made in the 90s. This property's been sitting vacant for like 25 years. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. And I do apologize if I was mumbling the questions. As I mentioned, the screen is scrolling really fast and I was having a very hard time keeping up. I did not mean any disrespect by doing that. So what we'll do is we will transcribe the rest of these comments. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to take your emails. It'll be the same email address as it has been before. And yeah, so as I mentioned, our next steps, we will be submitting our applications at the end of the month for annexation and the map amendment. And then we will kind of circle back with everybody on what our next steps are as far as the surplus process goes. So thank you everybody for attending. I appreciate all of your time and take care and have a good evening.